Chapter 2, Analyzing Accidents. Accidents tell us how to do things better. So while accidents are often viewed as bad things, and in fact they are bad things, usually by accident we mean something that we didn't anticipate happening, something that was unexpected. And so while there might be happy accidents or good accidents, in most cases when we're talking about accidents, we mean accidents that have harmful effects on others. What we want to do in this chapter is look at three of the causes, or three common causes of accidents. But looking at these three common causes and using conceptually three conceptual causes of accidents, we hopefully will make ourselves better engineers, but will also help us to be better moral persons. So we'll be able to look at a situation and anticipate the sorts of things that might cause harm to others. So as we go on to chapter 3, we'll look at design and harm. But before we do that, we want to look at what things cause accidents and what things are under the engineer's control. So there are three possible causes conceptually for accidents. The first is operator error. It's possible, of course, that it's not the artifact, not the thing that we've engineered, but the person using the thing that's been engineered that might be the cause of error. The second possibility is circumstances. So the circumstances that surround the use of an artifact may be the reason for the accident. And finally, there of course is the design of the artifact itself. So we'll look at each of these three possible causes for accidents in turn. So let's start with operator error. There are three possible causes of operator error. The first is a lack of intellectual ability. So we mentioned this in chapter 1, that one of the ways in which someone can cause an error, have a problem, or we can look at the cause of an accident, is because a person simply doesn't have the ability to operate the artifact. So lack of intellectual ability might be someone who is impaired in some way in their ability, doesn't have the required intelligence to operate the artifact that we're using. There may be any number of ways in which one's intellectual ability contributes to an accident. Intellectual ability, but not well trained. So let's imagine we have someone who's operating an artifact, whatever that artifact may be. And again, just to reiterate, an artifact is just the thing that's been created. An artifact can be a car if we're an automotive engineer. It can be the program that one's using. So whatever that artifact happens to be, it's possible that someone has all the requisite intellectual ability, there's nothing stopping them, but they're not particularly well trained. Finally, we can have someone who has the intellectual ability, who is well trained, but is not sufficiently motivated to use the artifact in its proper way. So if I'm lazy with my artifact, and this we see all the time, right? We can say someone doesn't read the manual, or someone decides that they don't really care to follow the safety procedure. So they might have been well trained on the thing that they're using, and they have all the intellectual ability, but they just decide that for reasons of laziness or indifference, or they're angry at their boss, they're not sufficiently motivated to actually use the artifact in the way that it was intended. So these are three possible causes. So when we look at a situation in which there's been an engineering failure, and this will come into play later on in the text when we're looking at how we place responsibility for an engineering failure. One of the things that we're going to look at conceptually is, well, did the operator err in some way? Now, the second way in which we can have an accident is through the circumstances. So let's say we have a case in which there is no operator error. The person had the intellectual ability, they were well trained, and they were well motivated to not have an accident. So the circumstances can contribute. Now, circumstances are a situation in which the conditions are the root cause of the accident. These sorts of circumstances can be determined by how much the situation deviates from a normal situation. So what is a normal situation, of course, requires clarification. When we're talking about circumstances and we're talking about the conditions in which make an accident, it can be sometimes difficult to know what normal is. Normal for you and I when we're talking about an airline flight, as we'll see in the later chapters, is different than what's normal for the pilot. right? So the normal situation is something that deviates, or an accident is something that's going to deviate from a normal situation. Sometimes it's difficult to tell what that normal situation is. So in cases where conditions play a role, it can often be difficult to determine whether or not it was the artifact that had a problem or whether it was the operator. And this is just what this chapter of the text is highlighting, is that these three causes of accidents, operator, circumstances, or the artifact, when these things play off, sometimes a situation may occur where it's partially the operator error, sometimes it's partially circumstances, sometimes it's artifact. Sometimes it may be all of just one of these three. And this is where things become difficult. So conditions or circumstances are often a difficult way of determining the cause of an accident. Finally, what we're going to be concerned about mainly in this course is with artifacts, with the failure of the artifact. So an artifact can fail in a number of ways as well. Was there something about the artifact that contributed to the problem? That's one question we can ask when we are conceptually trying to find the cause of an accident. We can actually ask whether poor design encourages error. So we've already mentioned in the previous chapter the idea of an error-provocative design, and this is what we're going to focus on in much of this course. Was there a small part of the artifact? Was the design as a whole a very bad design? Does it encourage error? So it's not just one aspect of the artifact or one aspect of the design, but the entire design which provokes error. And once we looked at that, we know that also that the artifact can be the source of harms to others. So even when the first two conditions are not met, in other words, in situations where the operator is not in error and circumstances are not unique in some way, we now know that the artifact, or we know that what's left is an artifact. And we can ask whether it's one aspect of the artifact, the entire design that's error provocative in some way, and because of those one or both of those first two, it's possible that an artifact can be the source of harm to other individuals.